So alphabetically, anybody want to take a guess on this? Oh, go with the first name. You can take that one. Okay. Anybody? We do have swag. Sorry, the... Oh, do it by name. Do it by name. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Wayne then Victor. Okay. Okay, so you think it's going to be Mark being which one? Okay, so you think he's a pie. How do you feel about that, Mark?
You want surname or first name?
Oh, we'll go for first name. First name. So to make it easier, I'm Wayne, Pat, Mark, Neil, Victor. Okay, so based on first name. You're not right. Anybody else want to have a stab at this? Whoa. Yep. Yep. It's an IKEA cabinet. So we got Victor. Well done. Okay.
That's good.
That was well done. So what we've got is we have got some swag to give away. Have you got a ticket to the... You take one of those. Well done. Okay. So there you go. So what we've basically got is we've got Mark Rhodes being the photographer. You want to explain why that is, Mark?
I take pictures.
About that restraining order as well, okay? Neil Hodgson, why is that the whiskey glass?
I know Spence Harbour far too well.
Yeah, Spence Harbour will drive anyone to drink, okay? That goes without saying. Okay, and then we've got Pat Martin.
So I have a small farm and I have some sheep, and I just did a session with Wayne and he put a picture up of the sheep and a picture up of some handcuffs. I'm not going to associate those two things.
But who was he handcuffing? In fact, we don't want to know that, okay? Myself, the pie. Pat kind of accuses me of eating all the pies. I've put on a bit of weight recently. I used to be a little bit thinner.
Evidence-based.
Evidence-based. So I ate all the pies, but like SharePoint Farms and taking over SQL along those lines. So, yep. And the last one is Victor.
Yeah, IKEA from Sweden. I guess you guessed that already.
Okay, so basically our agenda today, I mean, we basically had the opportunity that another session came up, and I was kind of thinking around what can we do to make this a little bit of fun, okay? So the session came up, and I thought, well, we've got some, great international speakers across, coming across the world from here. So apart from Pat and myself, who are based here in Auckland, or sometimes anyway. So what we thought we'd do is just basically have an open panel discussion for any questions that you want to ask anything about, and I had to clarify this, around SharePoint. So we're happy to ask or attempt to answer any of the questions. We have got swag to give away. So the condition on this is that if we can't answer your question, then you get the prize if you can't answer one of our questions.
I think if they can answer.
Sorry, if they can answer. If they can answer one of our questions, then you get to take some swag away on that. So hopefully you guys can't read the fine print, but there is always a little bit of fine print associated with this. Okay, so you get a copy of these slides. You can have a look at that and have a bit of a laugh. So this is meant to be a very light-hearted, have a bit of fun. I do appreciate that we're right before the Tech Fest. Okay, so with that, open questions. Go for it.
So the thing that I basically, this is basically my pet peeve, but what it comes down to is we're all into building high availability farms. The business wants 24/7. Whether we can give it to them is another question. But basically, I mean, there's SharePoint Online, and obviously Microsoft does upgrades to the SharePoint farm. I want to know how, there seems to be the idea that you have two farms, you upgrade one, you move everybody over onto that, and then you continue on with the other one. And I know you automated probably using PowerShell and things like this, but how do you, what do you use to bring it all together? How do you organize all your PowerShell scripts, and how do you organize all those processes to be able to do that repeatedly, fluently, without any downtime?
So the concept of no downtime is really, there is no concept of no downtime. Obviously, read-only, as you mentioned, is the scenario where we switch your farm to read-only, and then we can take the content, upgrade it in the background. How do we make that slick and quick? We do have something we call the repeatable upgrade framework, which is a very highly developed process. You said PowerShell scripts and processes. It's designed around all the things you said, bringing the content DBs together, upgrading the content DBs. We use the concept of service farms. So when we're upgrading your content, we don't need to upgrade search and everything else that goes with it. Forget the idea of version to version upgrades now. We've gone past the point of doing a 14 to 15 upgrade. Okay, and we do a lot of other things as well behind the scenes that you wouldn't necessarily want to do in an on-premises farm. And I can't discuss those. To be honest, I don't know all the details anyway. But from a content perspective, keeping the farm, we swing upgrade when we need to. So we put you in read-only mode, and we just have very well developed, very well tested. As you know, if you went through the process of 14 to 15 upgrades as an Office 365 tenant, we did have hiccups. There were scenarios where we did have outages, but we've learned from those. And today you should never theoretically see an outage. But in terms of all I can say is develop it, practice it, just keep repeating it.
So Microsoft wouldn't necessarily share those particular learnings?
No, because the things that we do, you find you probably wouldn't support it if you did it. What we do in the service isn't what we would envisage you do on premises.
Actually, regarding to that, me and Vesa Juvonen are working on a white paper regarding to that, but more focused on operations, not that much upgrade and that stuff, but more on operations, which hopefully will be out on TechNet in the near future or something. But making that available in a smaller scale, Office 365 is that large and it's very specific to their needs in 365, but to doing it on a smaller scale. So we're working on a white paper with that.
Okay. So I've got a bit of a side question. Has anybody run Fiddler against Office 365 recently? I know you have because I told you to. Okay, so something you can...
Remember, I didn't have to run it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So what you can do if you're a little bit of a geek, just run Fiddler against Office 365. In fact, Neil's probably going to get a bit upset with me for saying this. And have a look at the HTTP headers. Okay? So those who know SharePoint about what it does with the HTTP headers, there's actually quite an interesting number coming back out of those HTTP headers at the moment. I'll give you a clue. It's not 15. Okay. Anybody else got a question?
Speaking of outages, what is the actual process of getting some money back? I have an outstanding call about 6 months. And how do you prove that you have actually...
When we had an outage, I'm not with Microsoft as a consultant. We are using 365. We had an outage. We just submitted a service request, and it went through straight away almost. So it was very smooth for us. I don't know if you can answer that more, Neil.
No, I've never personally experienced an outage because my tenants never failed, unfortunately.
So have you started with the service request? Yeah. I don't know how to do it in a better way, but yeah.
So is there any way with SharePoint Online, so if you're using Office 365 and you've integrated that with Yammer and you're using Internet Explorer to get it to stop making re-log in every
I can kind of answer a little bit of that.
You can have it then.
Yeah, okay. So I can't give away too much, but there is changes afoot. Okay, so watch this space. There is something that they are working on, and something will happen. Okay, as to when, can't say.
Yeah, the Yammer integration or lack of kind of lack of is very much a V1. It's like how do we get something out there for people to use? As time goes on, you'll see things different. Yammer's not as big as integration point as Fast was, for example, in search. It took us 5 years to get where we are today with search. Yammer integration in terms of social hopefully won't take that long. We're a lot more agile than we were from a server platform perspective. But as Wayne says, there are changes.
Sorry. Okay, so this gentleman here was going to ask a question before.
Yes. I know that SharePoint you're saying requires a 1 millisecond latency. If you were putting it into the cloud, we just went to a speak session for performance tuning SQL Server and Windows Azure virtual machines. And we had a test of disk writes, and with the shredding, not shredding, what do you call it,
Fragmentation.
Not fragmentation. Striping. Yes, striping. When you stripe the disk, you can get a 20 millisecond latency for IOs. So how do you achieve your 1 millisecond latency to be able to put SharePoint SQL Server into a virtual machine under Windows Azure to achieve the 1 millisecond latency for SharePoint?
So let me kind of recap that. What we're saying is we have a statement that says we need or we should have sub or 1 millisecond latency between web front end and SQL Server.
Yeah.
But you're saying if we can only achieve 20 millisecond response time off the disk, how are we ever going to get 1 millisecond response time?
Yeah.
So the millisecond response time with respect to SharePoint is something that I'm quite passionate about and something I'm working on now in terms of providing the guidance for that. And we're really not concerned with how long SQL Server takes to respond to the request, which is where the disk latency comes in. And Pat, jump in if I'm getting this wrong, but our concern from a SharePoint perspective is really around the network latency and the round trip time. If you issue a big query to SharePoint and it takes to SQL and it takes 10 seconds to respond, that's irrelevant. That's just the nature of the query. It might be a particularly poorly written camel query, for example, that's just a hideous SQL statement behind it. It's really about the network latency and just that initial responsiveness. We're measuring latency from a SharePoint usage provider perspective just by doing select one statements against databases. That's doing no query at all effectively. So it's a very different thing. You know, SharePoint queries can take a long time. Yeah, but you can optimize SQL to improve that hopefully. But you can't join the two together in terms of the millisecond latency and how long SQL takes to respond. It is a different thing.
So just an example of that, I worked with Toyota out of Japan, and they did one of the first SharePoint 2013 deployments into Azure, and we did every trick we could think of under the sun to try and reduce some of those latency issues. So we did the old 64K unit sizes, split out all the disks just as much as we could, and optimized as much as we could from that perspective. So it can be done, and there is a large web content management site running out there in Azure at the moment for Toyota. So there is case studies around it.
So you can actually put SharePoint.
You can put it in. You can put it in the cloud.
SharePoint is 100% supported running an IaaS.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay, that's actually a good question. What would you like?
The robot?
Well, we'll save whoever asks the very, very best question to get the robot. So in the meantime, would you like something else?
But you're up there.
Meantime,
Would you like?
the bag?
Okay, you'll take the money or the bag?
Open the box. Money?
So the other thing we have got is that we have got the SharePoint conference passes, which we've got on those. So, or we've got some T-shirts, or we've got whatever's in the bag.
This is probably the most valuable thing out of all the prizes.
Probably more valuable.
Okay.
You could eBay that.
Um,
Can I take the Paul Cousin class and get a SharePoint conference pass? Because my boss won't send me because we're a not-for-profit.
Have you got a good question?
Have you got a good question?
Yeah.
You just asked it.
Maybe we'll hold that.
Well,
We'll hold that.
you have to come up with a good question.
This is back to the session we had before
Mhm.
about reporting services.
Okay.
Well, you're gonna, I think it's a bit focused though. Test environment. On a simple box, there is SharePoint, reporting services, analytical services as well. Everything's running on this box.
Right.
Now, everything in SharePoint points into this box in this test environment.
Mhm.
Yeah. What
How's that
happens-
working for you?
Oh, you're running a bit slow. To solve this problem, the DBA ripped out report services, actually took out
Yeah.
databases and report services.
Mhm.
And performance increased a bit, but not considerably.
Mhm.
But the problem was, in the test SharePoint environment, none of the reports run. Now, if you go into your reporting services area and say, right, now this isn't 2013, this is 2010.
Yeah,
I'm not
yep.
allowed to ask you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's SharePoint. Yep.
You're going to, all you're going to do is you're going to
Okay. So are you running it in native or integrated mode? You can't answer my question, so Sorry? It's in integrated mode. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess there's a number of things around that. The first one is when you say rip it out, you need to kind of remove it gracefully rather than rip it out. And in terms of the accounts that are being used, Reporting Services has a public key pair that it uses. It uses a secure channel between the server and the database. So if you change anything that was used to seed those keys, which includes the name of the machine or the name of the account, you're going to break that algorithm and bad things will happen. So things like storing the originals of your reports in some source control repository somewhere is a really good idea before you start to do that kind of thing. And also typically you wouldn't use Report Manager to manage your reports. If you're running in integrated mode, you're going to use the SharePoint portal to do that. And the last thing is the same comment I made to you before, which is that Reporting Services is two things. It's a server-side component and a database component, and the server-side component should not be on that same box. It should be in your web tier for architectural and performance reasons. Yeah. Right.
The problem is, if you come across this thing, there is nowhere to go. I have no avenue to fix it. They won't put it back in place, so you could actually detach, reattach, move Reporting Services onto a different server. I have no...
So the only supported way to move Reporting Service, I come back to supported because that's the area I work in. The only supported way to move reports from one server to another is to use the RS scripting host. That's our supported mechanism for moving any Reporting Services artifact, including reports and accounts and security permissions from one place to another. So one thing is making it work, another thing is doing it in a supported way. And in terms of places to go, you've always got Premier support cases as well if you're in that space. I mean, there's always that avenue. So.
Within the SharePoint environment,
Yeah.
you couldn't change any settings in the SharePoint environment because it involved changing the settings within the content.
That's more for you.
Yeah. So doing anything in the content DB. In fact, I've got two mics. Okay. So touching anything in the content DB without going through Premier support is completely off limits and unsupported. In fact, touching any of the SharePoint databases apart from logging, the logging databases is completely unsupported. Okay, unless Premier support tells you to do it as part of the support case. So in your particular case, what I'd recommend to do, if you've got a Premier support agreement, is actually raise a Premier support case on that. Or rebuild the server.
So the other thing too, just quickly based on Wayne's comment, is that the content database's copy of the report definitions are a secondary copy of those stored in the report server database, and they're cached and they're time-based. So your original sources are still in your report server database, not in your content.
Yeah. So what I've actually got for you is, this is a collector's item. Okay, it is the SharePoint 2010 pig. Okay. Which came from the 2011 SharePoint conference, and when it lands, it does make a noise. Since your farm is broken, unfortunately this pig is also broken as well. The elastic fortunately broke, but it was meant to be able to slingshot it across. So, but anyway, there you go. There's a good question prize.
Can I give you the SharePoint conference?
Yeah, if you want to. More.
I'd like to do the SharePoint.
Okay.
That's fair.
That's fine. There you go, Steve.
I like the feedback.
So in land of operations, I mean, SharePoint is a mother of a thing and requires lots of
I mean, it's
intelligent
nurturing
manpower
and
to
caring
maintain.
like a mother is that.
But we've got F5 load balancing, and I got really excited hearing about the request manager. And I was wondering what is, like, obviously the main pro for us would be, yay, we don't have to deal with the F5 guys if the request manager can fully take over. But what would be the main contra or the other main pro apart from getting rid of the F5 guys' involvement in any of that sort of work? What's the main benefit and contra for using the request manager?
Yeah, request management doesn't replace and layer 7 load balancer. You still need load balancer to load balance on the, if you have a separate request management layer, for instance. It needs to get in somewhere, and you don't want one server taking all the requests and routing them, because then you have a single point of failure. So you still need a layer 7 load balancer in front of them. It's more in general in terms of, when I talked in my session, the concept of web front ends are diminishing, but you have web service and application service, and if you use, for instance, health-based routing, they can route the incoming requests are routed to one of the request management servers. The request management routes it to the most healthy server, or if it's a crawl target, or for instance, if you want OneNote is a very chatty client, for instance. You want all OneNote updates to be on a specific pool of servers, for instance. That's what request management is used for.
Excellent. So it doesn't replace.
You've had too many prizes, even though you're going with the proper look.
Unless you got a
You're going for the
certificate
you're going for the sympathy vote with your leg as well. So yeah, go for it, Nick.
I've got a question around user profile. You know, when we've had big problems with that this year.
Oh, God. Is that
anyway,
my phone?
So I want to know about this magical thing called the record ID in the sub-user profile service, and why it is the unique identifier of profiles.
What is the unique identifier?
The record ID seems to be that the record ID is that joiner between your profile and your social database, and also that's what's used for things like NewsGate and some other sort of social collaboration stuff as well. So problem that we have is when you start on kick off full sync for a new user profile service application, that you can't import your social data because those record IDs are now no longer in sync anymore, and we can't recover that social information. So first question is, why is it like that? And second question, is there going to be something that can be done to fix that in the future so we can rebuild these profiles more, you know, if we had to?
Neil?
It's a 2010 question for the social data, because the social data database is gone. In
2013 has the same problem still from what I've
Yeah, I don't think that's been changed. So.
No, it's the same. It's still a record ID, but it's not tied to the user social data. Is it? Since the social data is basically not used anymore for social stuff. It's all in the content DBs.
Oh, right, yeah, okay, so it's just 2010, yeah.
So upgrade. Is it?
Tomorrow's session.
There is kind of one thing you could add to that. I know the scenario with NewsGator and the record ID. NewsGator imports profiles from the SharePoint user profile DB.
In 2013 as well, that
Yeah.
record ID.
In terms of how you can do anything in terms of syncing user profile data, I'm going to use a horrible word now. Don't hit me. UPRE or UPRE, right? So you can UPRE can key off a parameter or property of the user profile. Doesn't have to be record ID. So you can sync based on email. You can sync based on login ID. So you can sync between social DB, or not between user profile instances using a different key than the record ID. Because obviously when you do imports, you're not necessarily going to get the same record ID for the same user each time. So you can do something with UPRE. I wouldn't do it in production until you're doing an awful lot of testing in a test environment, though.
But we love UPRE.
You might.
Do you guys prefer it over the log shipping because that's now supported?
No, I would log ship every time.
Log ship every time?
Yep.
And that is really supported?
Log shipping is supported for user profile DBs, user profile and social DBs in 2010 and 2013.
But not the sync DB?
Well, you can do something with the sync DB, but it also involves then re-importing the encryption keys, which is a nightmare. So
Drop the sync.
I would drop the sync, rebuild your user profile service application using the 2 DBs that you've log shipped.
Yeah, that's been a recent change, hasn't it?
Yep, last week.
Yeah, there you go.
TechNet said it for a long time, but we didn't support it. TechNet was wrong.
Yeah.
We've since gone back and done some additional revalidation, and we now do support it. So the TechNet article is now right.
That was changed in March this year.
Yeah.
So it's changed as of last week.
As of last week, we officially support it, even though TechNet was 6 months ahead of us. So there's a guy, I don't know if you know, there's a guy called Ryan Campbell, who's a MCS consultant. He's written a blog article on how to do something similar to what you're saying, using the user profile service application.
Right. Don't need to drink, that's fine.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, brilliant, thank you.
You're welcome.
There's another question.
We're having a question on search service. What we're finding is that the incremental growth that generates the outbound processing grows, and then even when that growth finishes,
So your node runner process you're referring to is for the content processor, because the crawler runs as MS Search, right?
Yeah, so basically the fast search node runner process.
Mhm.
When the incremental call starts, we actually notice that it constantly grows, and afterwards it just stays on that cap and never releases the memory back. So we're running on March patch on Azure.
Uh-huh. So I mean, I've not seen that specifically. In terms of modifying the configuration of Node Runner, in the fast servers time back in 2010, we had configuration files that you could modify and reload, and that would cap the memory, or you could dynamically change the memory in that regard. That you could potentially still do that in 2013, although right now it's unsupported to do it. Coming back from a, can you, should you type scenario. The only thing I could recommend, which you're not going to like, will be a recycle the service. Or if there's a bug out there, I mean, I haven't heard of that, unless I don't know if anyone else has.
It doesn't look like it's a memory leak. If it stays that way, it's just the nature of .NET applications. Once they allocate memory, it will not give it back.
Unless it's SQL.
SQL
Yeah,
doesn't,
the same
SQL doesn't give it back.
Yeah. So that's just the nature of it. It reaches what it needs, and it doesn't need that back. It allocated that memory.
The downside from a recycle perspective is you can't individually recycle node runner processes.
Yeah.
You have to recycle the search service host. So if you're running additional search services on the same box, like query, for example, you're going to recycle the whole thing. It'll be quick. It'll come back up relatively quickly as long as you've not got very, very large indexes. But right now, I think that's probably the only thing you could do. But
So a question I'd have related to that, although I'm not a SharePoint guy, is once that memory increment has reached a certain point, if you run that same process again, does it reuse that memory that has grown, or will it allocate memory a second time?
Usually what we did, we just recycled
The whole box?
Yeah.
Because that would be a good way to test exactly what's.
See if it levels out there and stays.
Yeah.
I've seen they take 4 or 5 gigs. They do. So that's normal.
Yeah.
That's why you need large search service today.
yeah, one of the other things with the node runner is if you've got a lot of cores in the box, you'll also consume memory in proportion to the number of cores. So that's something to watch for with node runner. So I mean, I've seen node runner on fast for 2010 running with like 30 gig RAM easily.
So if we know that, for instance, there's a period during the day that it's safe to restart the service, is that supported mechanism that we do?
Yes, unless, as Pat says, if you're finding that when you next time you run a crawl, you're just reusing the same memory, it's probably normal, right?
And just think of how IS works with the W3, WP process. It's automatically built in to recycle it every night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do that, but when with the service, we don't have any, at the moment, we don't have any mechanism to schedule the recycle.
You create the scheduled task and restart service. It's the search host controller. If you have a time, you can do that.
You sure you're not writing the beta bits? Because there was an issue like that in beta.
We patched to March from the RTM.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to drop me a mail, I can do some digging for you and see if it's a known issue. I'll give you a card.
Out of curiosity, how much RAM have you got in the particular system?
Well, not much. We have 15 gigs.
Okay.
And you're running all search components on that box.
Yeah, so basically what we're starting to look into is dedicating a server just to search, but our search, because our content doesn't change that often. It did initially make sense to, it did make sense to have it on that box, but if we will see that it's, so basically we're playing around with the two ideas, either to have a scheduled restart of the service or to actually dedicate the box.
So when you say it's not dedicated, what other things are running? Are there non-SharePoint things running on that machine?
It's a web front end, so basically the role is a SharePoint web front end and the search.
So you're sharing resources with the web application as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
You should definitely look into have a separate search server, content processing, analytics, control.
I've actually seen, I think, what you're talking about on very staffed hosts, and that's only when distributed cache was on as well on that server. Is that on that server as well?
Yeah.
Between the two of those, you're going to need more memory, I think.
Yeah. Fire away. Go for it.
Yeah, in Active Directory you can have contacts, but then in People Search and SharePoint you can't import them as contacts in People Search. Is there a way to get around that?
No.
Custom BCS connector.
Yeah.
Build something.
That's what we had to do,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go for it.
Oh yeah, we're creating a SharePoint 2010 stock proof of
multi-sect environment. And so just regarding crawling, we use Sitecore as our website for London City Council. And
So, sorry, I can't hear you anymore. Sorry.
and we have a couple of GSAs that we do crawling content on our website. Can it be done, and is it best practice to use a GSA to crawl SharePoint content?
Not
You really want me to answer that?
The short answer is no.
Yeah, no. GSA and SharePoint don't mix well together.
Yeah. So even though you are doing some horrible stuff, yeah. I guess just a little bit on that. I mean, Neil can expand on this a little bit more. I mean, basically, what happens when SharePoint inserts itself, it does detect that it is actually SharePoint, and it actually goes and accesses it slightly differently in a more optimal manner. So.
I think we probably more developer type of question.
Victor.
Just consider like I'm just trying to put a scenario like we have a requirement like I need to build a custom solution which can be done as a sandbox solution, fully trusted solution, or as apps. Now, what will be kind of a strategy? Which option or which strategy will you take to develop the solution?
The answer to that question it depends. Of course, if you have any thought of going to the cloud, app is your only way, starting with apps. And I would go apps, sandbox, and fully trusted that way, and start that way, working down to fully trusted. Fully trusted is the worst option, but in many cases the only option still. But apps have, it's a personal preference right now, since it doesn't support all the things that the server-side API does. So you're pretty limited, but it's a good approach to start with that. Can it be done with an app? Yeah, then you might start with that. Otherwise, sandbox or fully trusted. Does it answer your question, or?
Yes, in a way.
Yeah, it's a threshold going over to working with apps compared to fully trusted code. It is, but it's worth starting that journey now, and at least start testing out your solutions if you can build it using apps. So you're prepared for future investment in SharePoint by the product team or in Office 365, etc.
Sorry, quick question. Do you think the server object model is going to go away anytime soon, since it's a classic?
Soon, yeah, I don't know. Not soon. I don't think so.
It hasn't been deprecated, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you know, like if it's classic now, will it be deprecated in the next?
yeah, well, I mean, the key thing to think about it is that they are, from a strategy perspective, it's the direction's very, very clear. Okay, it's going cloud-based. Okay, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
So the issue there is that server-side code is always going to be an issue. So,
and take a look at MSD, and they only talk about apps today. So it's very clear where Microsoft wants us to go and how we should develop.
Yeah.
So it's worth looking into.
So it's less of a question. It's just to add to that. Like, we're starting to go down the road now of if the business require a trusted solution, we try and convince them to change their business process to more go in line with what we can configure with SharePoint, because a trusted solution ends up creating way more operational headaches than it's worth, purely around, like, you're creating outages every time you deploy, and
time to market. If they want something built, if it's a fully trusted code, they have to wait for a service window. If it can be configured using out-of-the-box features or with an app, it can be installed the day after. So it's much cheaper in the long run, running with apps.
Damon.
So two questions. So question number one, common point services in 2013. There's a lot of enhancements done around theming, but they're largely around the outside of the reports which we're doing. A lot of customers want to have the performance point graphs in their kind of brand colors. Is there any way of actually implementing the dynamically generated colors in performance point services so that they can be applied to a palette? So that's question number one. I'm just coming up with nasty questions.
Oh no, yeah. Sorry, can't hear you.
And question number two, which is easy, so I'm kind of being a little bit nice now. So question number two, there's a lot of gossip going around the industry saying, is info platform services being sunsetted, is performance point services being sunsetted? Is there any roadmap guidance around
I won't answer on that question myself. I had that from a customer the other day, and I don't think there's any way to change that, unfortunately.
So I've been trying to get the roadmap for performance point services for some time now. So if you get it, can you let me know, please?
You want a
Yeah.
t-shirt, David?
And with regards to InfoPath, the guidance there is to look into other options. That's the roadmap. InfoPath. Look at other options. Look at apps, web forms, or similar.
Well, I'd like to put a different spin on it. Okay, so InfoPath was not an investment area for 2013.
Yeah. They did invest. They changed the icon in central admin.
Oh, sorry. It was a wee investment area in 2013.
It's disappeared behind my Nintex icon somewhere.
So, I mean, basically what it means is that it was an investment area. Is it going to go away? It can still be appropriate where it's appropriate. However...
Yeah, I'm in an upgrade project now with a lot of InfoPath forms, and we're migrating or changing all that InfoPath forms into SharePoint apps.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So with the guidance we should be giving customers now, because it's a really interesting one, because you've got a lot of customers on standard.
I know.
And you're looking at, should I go to the enterprise license? And one of
The barriers is InfoPath, yep.
Is the InfoPath, and they're actually looking at, should I buy enterprise
Apps.
and go InfoPath? So you'd be saying
Apps.
at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah, or Access Services 2013.
Yep.
That's a really good. They have
Well,
forms,
that's
they have
enterprise as
reporting
well,
and
though.
everything.
But that's enterprise license
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, so the customer kind of wants an excuse to go enterprise.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go
Yeah,
enterprise.
Access Services.
Always.
But it would be, if you're going to go enterprise, go access or build apps, don't keep sending people down.
Yeah, I'd be cautious, but that's that's probably me getting a don't come Monday.
One of my architects, he said to me, hey, you can put an InfoPath form for the customer if they really want it, but put it in and run like hell.
Yeah. I guess the other issue too is that a lot of people that start off with the InfoPath forms, they sometimes hit some certain points where some of the types of forms they want to create does prove to be a little bit difficult within InfoPath. So an example of that is that they may want to hook into the managed metadata service application. Out of the box, there's no way to do it. Into 10, but now that we've got the REST interface, you can potentially do it. So, just a few little things you need to be wary of that on the surface, InfoPath seems great, but sometimes it's not as great.
It's like a good prototyping tool for the customer, and then you build a web form.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other question around that is, what about InfoPath as part of Office? So actually the rich
Office apps.
Yeah. So,
That's the answer to that one. So you're thinking about the document information panel. Or
so just actually kind of for Office InfoPath, like the rich client. So obviously you can use that as standard without needing to go to the enterprise cloud. Is that kind of same guidance with the web-based form services? Is it like
I guess so.
from InfoPath and Office as well?
I think so. Yeah. But if you want forms in Office, like the document information panel, you should replace that with Office apps instead.
Target.
There was a thing last night in the deep dark printing. Now, I was playing one up this question.
I told you about that camera.
The guidance was the application associated with that logging we was looking at last night. I didn't get the answer. You got the answer from Wayne. What was the application that was associated with that logging? Can you remember what it was talking about logging within the deep dive sessions?
Give me the service application that was the prerequisite for it.
So the logging database or the state.
You said last night what it was, you said, there is an application associated with that logging. That's the last thing you said last night. And I didn't get the answer. Mark said, I don't know the answer yet. I didn't get the answer.
Oh,
I wanted
God.
to know what it was.
Oh God, I can't remember. I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
There was an application associated with WSS logging.
An application. Oh, la 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 la.
No, not you.
Okay.
Do you mean like a third-party application?
No,
that
it was
can-
the SharePoint.
Oh,
application.
okay.
Do you know what?
Yeah, I think I know.
Yeah, the
I
service
think it was with regard to state, and I think it was. Yeah, I think what it was is that if, for example, if you provision the search service application, it will
Yeah.
automatically create the state service for you.
create the logging service.
And
Like a
logging,
logging
yeah.
service for you. So yeah, so basically, yeah, I think I understand the context. Okay, so basically, when you go to provision a farm, there's a couple of little prerequisites that you sometimes want to set up yourself, otherwise SharePoint will automatically provision them, and one of them is the logging. So for example, if you take a vanilla farm, install search first, lo and behold, you'll find that you've got the logging there.
Oh, no, that was earlier
Yep.
today.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay.
It was an application associated with the actual
Excuse me.
feed diving.
Okay. Okay.
I can't, I put you on.
You have to come back.
Sorry about
Okay.
Yeah.
Ruben.
It's a bit of a dev question. Also, one of the most thing that excited me the most when SharePoint, basically 2010, 2015 was out, that OData client, so that you could query OData from JavaScript. And I've noticed that it's still with anonymous, and the anonymous there's lots of issues with it. So it's basically working pretty smooth when you're authenticated. The minute you're trying to go anonymous,
Yeah, by default it's anonymously disabled on most of the REST endpoints. There are some XML hacks you can do to get that working.
I've done it, but it didn't seem to. I've done the PowerShell one where you actually turn those flags on.
Yeah.
But it still seemed to.
Which endpoints are you trying to use?
I've seen that blog entry that everyone was throwing in.
Waldeck Mastercards has written a couple of blog posts on that. And it's basically search. That's I think it's search and some other endpoints you can enable for anonymous authentication, which are useful in public-facing.com sites, for instance.
So basically, turning these flags on
Should, yeah. Yeah. We're using it in a couple of .com sites which are very search heavy. We use a lot of those REST interfaces. Unfortunately, I don't do that kind of customization anymore, but I know about those blog posts and how that we done it. So that should work, at least. Otherwise, check Waldeck's blog and post a comment on his blog and ask him, because he usually answers pretty fast.
We ended up finding a way to use a proxy basically serve it.
You created your own proxy, okay.
Yeah, but that's basically a different idea on scale level.
Mm.
And trying to turn those flags on.
Yeah. Look into his blog post.
No.
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 This is a bit of an information security management side of things. We've got our guys looking at wanting to know what sort of lives inside our SharePoint platform. This is all around that sort of PCI compliance and making sure we're keeping our data safe.
Uh-huh.
Now, obviously, just wanting to understand if you guys have seen this before, any considerations for that. One of the things we're concerned about is letting these sort of tools come in and sort of start scanning our networks, and particularly in a production environment, what sort of things might we need to look out for? What could it do in terms of performance of the farm? But also they wanted access to the database layer as well, and that was kind of something that okay, what's going on here? So,
yeah.
Thoughts from you guys? Just so we've got some clear direction to go back and say, yay, nay. Can we also throttle a user at a web application layer as well? Maybe we give them access in via a web app, but with a certain amount of, allocation and rate that they can get data back.
So are they trying to do discovery on the content?
Well, they're not trying to do discovery content. They just want to know what that content looks like, what's the metadata around it. So things like an internal customer number, if there is a credit card number, a bank account number that might be associated with that, even inside the document, they want to know what data might be inside there as well. So it's really heavy in terms of what they're looking for.
So full text crawling.
Because it sounds like search is your friend, right, for that. Search
can get to that information, right?
Search can get to all that information, and in 2013, there's a concept of what we call a client type, which is you can prioritize different clients. So if you're concerned about the impact of someone doing a lot of heavy queries against your search platform, for example.
Yeah, it's an external application that's coming in. So
right, but the external application, if you're going to use search is the easiest way to discover all of your content, without question. Unless otherwise you're talking
so it sounds like this is a third-party product
coming in. So
okay.
it's talking about somebody else wanting to know what lives inside.
But that third-party product can still if it's a product that can make queries against SharePoint, why can't it make queries using the SharePoint?
How
using
does it query
services?
SharePoint?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what we don't know.
So, I mean, I'll be a
they
little...
wanted to just give a database access. I'm
Wait,
like,
no, I wouldn't be doing that.
No.
Because you very easily could end up in an unsupported state.
Yeah, I'd be tempted to go back to them and say if they're willing to write a search interface
Yeah.
for exposing the content, then
Yeah.
their search query that comes in can contain a parameter which is a client type.
Yeah.
The client type, you can control the throttle on the client
Yeah.
type.
And by
And
default,
if
it's
they
low.
refuse to do it, by default, a client type that doesn't identify itself gets throttled anyway.
Yeah.
So they can still find the content, but the throttle will basically come in. They'll preference, the search service will preference your own users and the SharePoint services over that incoming request.
Yeah.
So I would go down that route to discover the content.
I can add on to that bit. I haven't been through PCI, but I went through visa compliance a couple of years ago, and we were able to push back quite a bit on them and say, look, we can't give you access to these systems, this is not supported, but we can assure you that none of the details and what they're after, specifically unencrypted credit cards being stored in the system, as long as we went back and said there's no chance of that being stored in there, they were good with it, actually.
But search is your friend. Yeah. Well, actually do a search for the word confidential. It's amazing what you can find. Particularly if you're indexing the file systems.
In PowerView, is there a way to pass a primitive to a slicer?
In PowerView? I don't know. Yeah.
So there must be...
Oh, fuel.
Yes, you can. A slicer basically becomes the name range, so you can parameterize it.
Okay. Cool. That's a good question. We're starting to run out of swag, so we can have a T-shirt. Okay, you can have a T-shirt. There you go. Oops, sorry. Okay. Well, actually, while I've got the pointer, I'm going to ask you guys a question.
Good.
Is that the question?
That's the question. You didn't read the fine print, did you?
Wow.
No. Anybody know the reference to that? I know you do.
42.
No, it's on the Bridge of Doom. Monty Python.
Who's got it? Who's already got it?
Very good. Okay. So we'll go through another ones. These are some random questions that we came up with. Well, so this one is actually not a depends. It is either one or three servers. Okay. Anybody want to know the reason why? Does anybody question the reason why? Does anybody care?
Like low prime numbers.
Don't use workflow.
That could be the answer. So basically what it is, it comes down to the way that Workflow Manager has implemented using the service bus. So essentially what it does is that if you've got three servers, it can form a quorum. So it can actually do a failover. So although you can go with like 2 or 4 servers that may appear to work, you're actually not in a high availability state. So if one of the nodes go down, you won't actually fail over. So it's the way it is. Get over it. So it's either 1 or 3. So the question for Victor is, where should these actually be hosted? Do you put them on your SharePoint farm, or do you put them out on a separate farm?
One of the diagrams, I believe you did have them co-hosted with the front-end service.
Yeah. So on which
This is an
servers?
advanced question.
Yeah, it is. Very
If you're very workflow heavy, you should have it on its own servers. But if you're just using workflow very sparse, then you could share it with SharePoint.
So if the 3 is the formal forum, doesn't that mean they could also have 5?
In theory, it's well. Actually, talking to the product team about this, they went, "Oh, in theory it should work, but we've never tested it."
So
Okay.
no.
So no.
Too cheap to set up 2 extra servers?
Well, what actually really scares me about this is that Workflow Manager is actually Azure Workflow, which they took from the Azure services. So it's actually the same product. So that kind of makes me wonder: is your workflow running on 3 servers? It's the interesting thought about that. Okay. Okay.
Just a question regarding this one. Like in that case, if we have like a 3 workflow server of 1, and if you want to create a more DL type of situation, how do you create it? Like if we have 3 workflow server in one side, one data center, does it mean we'll have another 3 in other side, or we
Yep.
not actually using geoflow?
That's right. Yes. Yeah, so the whole DR story around Workflow Manager is complicated, to say the least. Yeah, so Neil actually spends ages going through that.
So don't go to
I didn't
DR.
get this session.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we used to go through that. Yeah.
What I told you about this morning when we swing in between these two farms, we actually have Workflow and we swing in between. We have evolved a couple of PowerShell scripts that does it for us. So, but it's was a bit threshold getting over it and understanding how to do a proper DR on that one. But it actually works really smooth.
Yeah. I guess the one thing in terms of the question about one server or three servers from a DR perspective, depends how quickly you want to recover your environment. If you're prepared to run with one in DR and run defense, effectively run almost degraded, if you like, but functional. Your DR scenario for the service bus and for workflow is your SQL DBs. That's your fault domain, if you like. So as long as if you replicate those, mirror or log ship those DBs to the DR site, you can recreate the workflow farm using one server, scripted, very quick, and then connect SharePoint to it. Yep. So you don't have to have three servers sat there just in case you need to fail over.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, it's a good point.
Can we use, I can ask you a question too, right? Can we use always-on technology in SQL for some?
Absolutely. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So if it's in a different data center, it'll be asynchronous commit.
Yeah. The limitation with asynchronous replication and always-on is we only support content DBs right now. So service application DBs, we're not currently supported to use always-on asynchronous replication.
Yeah, so hurry up and get off your butt and test it, Neil.
Oh, my job.
So here's a question for Victor, since he loves Office web apps.
I know the answer to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go.
Don't you? It should be in the same domain. It's the best option. It can be in the same format, but it's preferred in the same domain as the majority of your users. If you have a multi-domain scenario, focus on where the majority, just like SharePoint, and it must be in a domain. That's a requirement. If you have more than one server, and you should have more than one server. Yeah.
You said you support always-on availability groups for content in asynchronous mode. If you had another always-on availability group for configuration, could that be in synchronous mode?
Yes.
So synchronous mode is fine for low latency networks for high availability.
Right. So what would you class as low latency? 26 milliseconds?
So if you're in synchronous mode, you do need to meet that 1 millisecond network latency.
You have to meet the 1 millisecond.
Yep, correct.
So
And you have to be in the same logical data center as well. So otherwise you get into that, that horrible stretch farm type scenario as well.
And just to add to that real quickly, and just from a database perspective, we've had for a while, we've had ASB Bank having synchronous geo-replication between Albany and the city, which is about 25k. And their users notice, even when you get to around... Hello, ASB person. When you get to 3 or 4 milliseconds, you had a lot of conversations and work with DBAs there, and users start to notice. Applications notice 3 or 4 milliseconds in sync.
Since it's basically mirroring, the commit is on the other side, so that will be for every transaction, that latency.
So I'm just conscious that we're running out of time, so let's just quickly kind of skip through these. Because what I think we need to get to, the summary, and we know what's next.
We still have one prize here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you still have your thing.
I do. So you guys can choose when I've been giving out the prizes, as you can think, and we've also got one more T-shirt left as well.
That's a lot of responsibility, mate.
So
Question. Why are all the SharePoint seminars over there?
because
they're
they're
still up. I mean, you don't get the chance to break the walk across.
I know.
They're not very cripple friendly over there.
I know. Good question. Don't have an answer for it. Apart from the fact that I think for the last 4 years we've been across the road for some bizarre reason. So.
Well, the developers came back over this year, right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
I spent 8 sessions in the ballroom. I still don't have dance.
Still don't have what, sorry?
I spent 8 sessions in the ballroom.
Oh, and you still don't have a dance. Okay.
You got a good dancing partner now.
There you go. That's for you.
So at least it's
Yeah.
some criteria, right? Otherwise it's
Okay.
a bit tough.
So let's-
Yeah, so we've figured it out.
Okay.
Shall I go with it? So I think the question that we really didn't answer, and you may have your own perspective, but the question we really didn't answer was the question relating to the performance point colour support. So the gentleman in the
Damon.
Damon over there.
Okay.
Hopefully he's got kids. Right?
So anyway, let's go to the Geek Fest. Hopefully that was a bit of interest for you, a little bit left field. So 2 more sessions tomorrow.